FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. It's Kerry, Lutz. The date is April 29th, 2015. Things are just coming apart at the seams. As Andrew Hoffman says, death of credibility. Andy, welcome. How are you?
I'm fine. And again, I keep writing about the titles of my post-FOMC commentaries about the death of Fed credibility and idiocy and lunacy and cluelessness, and the whole world sees it. And, today's is going to be no different because, especially after today's GDP report, but it's not just here. It's what's going on around the world. It's getting to the point where I really, truly don't believe anyone is listening anymore. Because, again, the only people that are telling you the Fed, it's so important what they do. It's, are the people who have no ratings, the CNBCs, the Bloombergs. No one is listening to them anymore just because they say that everyone cares what the Fed is doing. To me, the only thing that matters right now in the entire world is whether the massive manipulation of markets, which is now a 24/7 affair led by the U.S. government of everything from stocks to bonds to currencies, commodities, gold, you name it, their ability to keep these games going as the ultimate reality falls apart below them, underneath their feet, is the only thing between this and the end of the monetary system as we know it. And, again, you laugh at things like Twitter. I railed against Twitter. The Saudi cleric called it the root of all evil. I think from a social standpoint, it's one of the ugliest representations of American society there is. And to see this morning it completely collapsing, lack of growth, everyone's starting to be aware that most of their growth is these bots, which aren't even real people. We're just seeing these are the bubbles that are falling apart underneath the Fed's eyes, and they're just going to have to ramp up the money printing and ramp up the market manipulation because as I call it, the unstoppable tsunami of reality is starting to overwhelm them on a global basis.
It's rather remarkable, and Twitter, as it turns out, it's just an illusion, isn't it?
They all are. Forget the social aspect of it, where you have generations of people growing up where all they do is stare at their smartphones and tweet each other and talk to each other, and they don't read books or educate themselves or try to do anything worthy of society anymore from a social standpoint. These businesses are all fraudulent. This stuff was public knowledge last year that at least a third of all the traffic on the internet, on these social sites, is not real. We get it. We get it at the Miles Franklin blog. We've had to adjust our statistics several times because we go in and we see all these fake email addresses put in. Why people do it, I don't know. It's not like it boosts our revenue to have them. But the fact is, these bots, which are the equivalent of algorithms in the stock market, are all just creating something that doesn't exist. And as for Twitter, at least Facebook has some redeeming value in that you can communicate with people. All Twitter is just a giant chat room. And the days of chat rooms are going to be numbered.
Certainly appears that way. So illusions happening at many different levels of society, and it's just you kind of pick your illusion is what it comes down to.
And by the way, I even was talking about this morning, just last week, people wonder how CNBC could have its not lowest rating in years, its lowest ever rating right now with the NASDAQ at 5,000. Jim Cramer said Twitter is the greatest internet stock out there. It has the greatest growth prospects of any internet stock, the most catalyst. This is why people don't listen to these people anymore. No one is listening to the Fed. No one is listening to the financial media. No one is listening to their politicians anymore. It's a very scary world. And that's why so many people have been getting sucked into these social media sites. It's kind of like being drunk. It's like an outlet for misery, and it just compounds on itself. People need to face reality and do things that are productive for themselves and society. It's very scary.
Yeah, and you really make an excellent point there, Andy, is a rechanneling, a recycling, a redirecting of your energies as an individual to something that's meaningful, something that's fulfilling, something that really makes a difference to you and to society as a whole, right? I mean, you just can't go on this way leading a vacuous, unsubstantial nothing of an existence.
Yeah. And again, it's a product of the environment, the nature versus nurture. I mean, the environment for youth, for instance, has never been worse in our lifetimes, in generations, where people, the outlook for jobs is so bad, and the government entitlements and the socialism and the empowerment of youth versus adults, and the belief that you really don't have to work anymore, and the fact that people realize that there's no opportunities to work anymore, and you see all the student debt and all these things going on. So people get drawn into this, and this is how demagogues come around, and how vacuous type pastimes come around, bread and circuses, etc. And so part of it is you need to try to rise above it, but it's really difficult to do so. And that's why we think about people like Elijah Johnson, who at age 15 rose above it. I can't imagine even myself at age 15 having thought about stuff like that. But there's only a few people out there who have the ability to do it, and we need to encourage that wherever it's possible. I mean, God knows my 3-year-old daughter, I'm already thinking ahead as to how I can do this with her, because it's so important to her life and to society of the future.
Oh yeah, it's really vital that you do this, and you can't wait. That's the thing. You really cannot afford to wait. This time is really running out. It's what it comes down to. And if you're waiting, what are you waiting for? I mean, I know people in their 30s, they're living in their parents' cellars. And what kind of existence is that, really?
Yeah, the American dream. What was the name of Bush's? I forgot what it was. The Affordable Home Act. It had some really, glowing unicorn lollipop name. But the fact is, all it did was just suck people deeper into debt in a bad economy. And as you said, people are living in basements. Just read today, 30-year low in home ownership. And forget home ownership. How about the amount of equity people have in their houses? And remember, this is with interest rates at all-time lows, which is why it's so comical when people talk about raising rates. Rates will never be raised. They will eventually go up because of market forces, but they're not going to be going up because the Federal Reserve is going to do so.
Yeah. So markets aren't allowed to function, and the aftermath, the unintended consequences of not allowing markets to function is just disastrous to society. And
exactly.
Individuals.
My new hero is David Stockman. I can't speak of what he did way back when he was a politician and venture capitalist, but the concept of his book, The Great Deformation, which I haven't read the book, but I read him all the time. I know exactly what he's talking about, and I have mirrored it in my readings, in my writings about what the ramifications of all the easy money have been, the massive oversupply. For instance, in shale, right? The shale oil, I just was shocked to believe that this is only April. In the first 4 months of the year, shale producers, after 5-6 years of this massive growth in their capitalizations and their production, have raised more equity in the first 4 months of this year than in any year ever. And they've also year to date raised more debt capital than in any year to date. Meaning, as things have collapsed further and the supply demand outlook, it has gotten worse. All this free money on Wall Street and the record stock prices and the relentless Wall Street buy have gotten people to finance them further at these levels so that they can produce more into an oversupplied market. I mean, this is the essence of the deformation. And it's across the board, from ghost cities, to massive oil oversupply, to too many mines, to too many tractors, you name it. It's across the board. Heck, even the price of rice is falling. And for those who want to believe that housing is recovering, has anyone looked at the price of lumber? The price of lumber is literally in free fall right now.
Yeah. Oh, it's
covering housing market.
It's madness. I mean, it is a madhouse out there, and there's just nothing there to stop it. So what about this Chinese QE? It works so well in the rest of the world that the Chinese now think it's a good idea. And what are they going to be buying up? Because there's how much Chinese government debt is there really? They got to be buying up all of the local debt.
Absolutely.
And that's madness.
I mean, put it this way. We're in April 2015. Does anyone remember when Abenomics started? Remember the 2-year program to double the money supply, within 2 years? It started in April 2013. So we now are at, quote, the end of Abenomics. And this week, Japan reported its worst ever plunge in retail sales. It's also had its only trade deficits ever, all starting since Abenomics. Its lowest real wages probably in decades. And of course, a former Bank of Japan governor came out earlier this week and said, ending Abenomics is not only out of the question, just considering an exit would be a nightmare. That's what they said in Japan. Now, in China, the situation, frankly, is even more dire because they don't have a couple of 100 million people there. They have 1.5 billion. And they have $28 trillion of across-the-board debt, most of it created since 2008 because of all the government's free policies of allowing people to do whatever they want and encouraging it. And as a result, their bubble, they have the greatest deformations of anywhere. Their bubble has been collapsing between housing and industry. I just read that their rail shipments are down, I think, 20% year over year. They're not growing 7%. They're falling 7% right now. So what's going on? You're starting to see defaults across the board. So earlier this week, there was, what I call the trial balloon. They leaked rumors that the PBOC is considering the purchases of local government debt, in other words, QE. And if they wind up doing that, which they're going to have to do at some point, unless they want everyone in default, it's going to be China's first official foray into QE. They've already created the biggest stock bubble since the 1999 internet here. I mean, my God, 4 million brokerage margin accounts opened last week alone. So you're having soaring stocks while the economy plunges. Now, if they're going to do QE, what it's going to do, it's going to take this final currency war I've been talking about into DEFCON 1. It's going to pressure the Fed, of course, to do more QE here. It's going to pressure Japan and everyone else to print more money there. And of course, remember, they're going to have to depeg the yuan at some point because the surging dollar is killing its manufacturing. And when they do, that's going to be the real big bang. So you combine QE with the potential for a depegging of the yuan, and as we were talking about beforehand, and I've been writing about, it's going to put such negative pressure on the yuan that it's going to force them probably to announce how much gold they actually have, or at least make an increase. Remember, the last time they announced it, they said it went from 600 tons to, I think, 1,050 tons back in 2009, and they haven't said it since. And I'm telling you, if they do QE and they start to really pressure the Chinese currency, even in the offshore currency markets, which are unofficial, there's a very good chance that they're going to be forced to save themselves to say this. And my God, whatever the number they pick, I mean, we know the number is enormous. If they say it's 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, it's going to remonetize gold on a global basis. And that's why, I mean, look what's going on in the world. Gold's got this massive floor at 1,200 that's been created by all this capping, all the mining companies going out of business, record Chinese and Indian demand right now. I mean, something is going to give. And the fact that people are not protecting themselves right now, especially here in the States, with the Fed on the verge of QE4 at some point in the near future, is just incredible. An incredible statement as to how far the U.S. mindset and a lot of Western mindset has degraded.
Oh, it's just out of control. And it seems like there's no more limits. And used to be common sense was the limit, but there's a complete absence of anything resembling common sense here, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, look. I mean, again, I say look at markets. There's no markets. The stock market isn't going up. It's being taken up by the government. Again, it's the government. It's not even JP Morgan. JP Morgan just is a partner of the government. The government says do this and you're too big to fail. It's all about the US government doing everything they can to maintain the status quo, whether it's creating this new oil PPT that buys oil futures despite horrible economic data and oil data, or the cartel that naked shorts gold and silver despite every imaginable fundamental factor screaming for it to go higher, or of course stocks going to record high levels, of course not adjusted for inflation, during the worst economic data ever. I mean, today, the GDP number today, we didn't even get to that yet. It came out at 0.2% for the first quarter. Okay, why people were expecting 1%, I don't know, since the Fed's own tracking number was saying 0.1%. But on top of that, they even reported a negative GDP deflator, negative. So they said that our cost of living fell in the first quarter of this year, if you can believe that. So, but even worse than that, okay, this is absolutely incredible. The only reason that we didn't have a negative 2 or 3% was because the first quarter of 2015 represented the biggest U.S. retail inventory build in U.S. history. Never before have corporations made so much stuff that hasn't yet been sold. That's why the GDP number went up. And when that stuff can't be sold or can't be sold at the prices that they were expecting, you're going to see incredible collapses in profit margins and earnings. And by the way, the GDP is going to fall because they can't produce it anymore. When they start selling it, it doesn't count. It's only when they produce it. So this was one of the ugliest GDP reports in memory. And let's stay with quotes around it. Coincidentally, it comes out 4 hours before the FOMC statement, giving the Fed all the ammunition they need to be as dovish as possible, as if that's possible. And again, it's only a matter of time before their statements go from, yes, we're uncertain about the economy, but we're still evenly, the risks are still even, and we're still considering what to do, to, you know what, this is getting scary. We're starting to see risk to the negative, and therefore we're going to have to consider new policy changes sometime in the future. I mean, it's only a matter of time. Will they do that today? Probably not, because they still got the stock market near its highs. But I mean, at the pace we're going, as I call it, that Yellen reversal it's within distance now. It's the light at the end of the tunnel. And when that comes, first of all, the end of the gold bull market that we've seen overseas will permanently end here. And we're also going to see some massive, massive currency volatility around the world as that final currency war goes nuclear.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back, this is years ago already, Jim Sinclair saying, we're going to see days when gold goes up and down $100 more an ounce. It looked like we saw it 3 years ago, but then the powers that be managed to literally put a lid on the boiling cauldron. But I'm in complete belief that we're going to see that volatility come back in spades. And when it does, that volatility is just going to be earth-shattering. You're just not going to believe the extent and the intensity of the volatility, and not just in precious metals, in everything around the world, and how businesses are going to be able to sustain themselves and keep on going. That is going to be the real big challenge, Andy.
Well, I wrote an article last year called "The Single Most Precious Metal Bullish Fundamental Issue Imaginable." And that issue is currency volatility caused by the final terminal stage of this fiat Ponzi scheme. Businesses can't do business when the currencies are collapsing and surging. Mm-hmm. And that's what's been happening. It's not like that will happen. Look at what's going on with currencies right now. Look at the euro, the ruble. I mean, these are big currencies. The pound is near multi-year lows. No one even talks about that. This has been going on now for months. It's been going on for 4 years. The average currency is down 40%. The average Fragile 5 currency is down, I think it's 90%. The BRICS, I should say, the BRICS, the average currency is down 90% in the last 4 years. And these are the supposed strong suits. But, as for gold and silver and what Sinclair said, I hate that word volatility when they talk about it with gold. There's been no volatility. It's gone down hundreds of dollars at a time, countless times. It never goes up, ever goes up like that. Yeah, I mean, we've seen rallies over periods of months, especially before the point of no return 4 years ago when the cartel went berserk with their nonstop daily machinations. But, we haven't seen any upside volatility in gold yet in 15 years. Yeah, we've had a couple of good days. Down at the end in 2008 after they smashed it, it had one big $70 up day, whatever. But aside from that, it's all been on the downside. We haven't seen the upward movement. Maybe a little bit at the end of the silver rally in 2011. It started to move like that in silver, but we haven't seen anything in gold yet. And as for the rest of this stuff, the stocks, the bonds, look, you're going to lose your shirt on bonds over time. I mean, it's guaranteed. These things are all worthless, trading at all-time highs. And as for stocks, whether they hyperinflate or they crash, people are going to lose massive amounts in real terms over time. It doesn't matter. If you want to own stocks at all-time highs in the worst economic environment ever, with interest rates at their all-time lows, well, good luck to you. But I really don't care. It's about self-preservation right now, which is why I own real money at cost below the cost of production.
Yeah, and that's definitely the best alternative, because if what's going to happen, what we believe is going to happen, actually happens, you're going to have very few choices where to put your money. Let's face it, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I wrote yesterday, my article is called The War on Money. It was called The War on Cash. Forget the war on money, which is the cartel trying to, disparage the only real money the world has ever known. But I'm talking about the war on cash, NIRP. And now you're seeing all these announcements where you're not allowed to take cash out of your bank and you're not allowed to pay with cash and all kinds of things. And JP Morgan won't let you store coins in the safe deposit box anymore. I mean, all kinds of ways and all these capital controls that are out there, the FBAR and FATCA regulations that just came into effect in the States. I mean, everywhere they're taking away your ability to protect yourself, which is how you cannot at least have a small portion of your portfolio in real money outside of the system, and gold, silver is beyond me, because the more these crises expand, as we saw in 2008 when they were talking about confiscating IRAs, the more that these draconian controls are going to come, whether it's to your bank account, your brokerage, your capital controls, you name it. And heck, I mean, they may even try to do stuff with gold and silver, but if it's in your hands out of the system, it's pretty hard for anyone to get their hands on it.
Much harder, that's for sure. And I wrote about this war on cash, Andy, over a year ago. I have to give myself a pat on the back. I saw this coming because they haven't been replacing Federal Reserve notes in circulation. They're all in horrible condition, and there can only be one reason why they're not replacing them with new notes the way they used to. Used to be you went to the ATM and the bills that came out of there were pristine. They were brand new, hot off the press. Now they are in disgusting condition, and you got to ask yourself why they're doing that. And don't
forget that the cost of ink has surged too. Mm-hmm. So, like we were a few years ago with the cost of dimes and nickels, or nickels and pennies, probably the cost of a dollar is more than a dollar.
Yeah, exactly. So really, you got to look at this and you know what's coming. So if you're not prepared, you have only one person to blame, and that's you. Anyway, find Andy's work over at milesfranklin.com, as well as his colleague, Bill Halter. Get the Daily Missive, audio blogs, milesfranklin.com, and join us over at financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for our free newsletter, as well as our free webinars. Andy, we will talk to you next week. Enjoy the week ahead.
Thanks, you too.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.